Lily and Isabella here.
And Jennifer Brown, JJ Brown.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the genetics behind phenylketonuria, PKU. I'm very, very lucky because my mom is a geneticist. And so her understanding of what PKU meant when I was born was vastly different than the average parent who doesn't have a genetics background. And that's because phenylketonuria is a genetic disorder. So, how would you describe to somebody the genetics behind having PKU or phenylketonuria?
Well, I think that my training in genetics when I was working for my PhD, I had learned about PKU as an inherited disease. And what that means is that you get it from your mom or your dad, or in the case of PKU, your mom and your dad. So it's not something that is because of what you ate or a chemical in your environment. It's not something you can take a drug and it'll go away. Genetic means that it's in your genes. You get one for PKU from your mom, one for PKU from your dad, then you have PKU.
So, but do the mom and dad in this instance have PKU? How does that work?
No, and it's a question I often get is people will say to me, so your daughter has PKU and you didn't know you had it, or no one else in your family had it, and that's the whole nature of the thing, is that the carrier, it's just like carrying something around with you that no one can see. So you're carrying it around with you and no one can see it, and if your partner, who you have a child with, is carrying it around too and no one can see that, then after you get together and make the baby, if you each gave that hidden thing to the baby, then you can see it. Is one way to look at it. It's called a recessive, meaning a hidden gene. So only if you have two copies of it do you have the condition. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So it's something you get that's carried down in your family, and you might not ever have seen it before in your family. It may have just been carried, and then boom, if you meet up with someone who has that same thing, then the child may have the condition. So that's what it means to have an inherited genetic disease that's recessive, which most of them are.
Well, so in my instance, you were a carrier and my father was also a carrier. So what were the odds that I would get PKU? Because it wasn't 100% sure that I would have PKU.
Right.
And you only would know these odds afterwards anyway, because you guys didn't know you were carriers till you had me.
Right.
But what were the odds that I would have PKU?
If the odds that you would have PKU were 1 in 4. So I always used to joke around, because numbers, they kind of scare people. So I used to say, well, it's like PKU is 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 18,000, depending on which population you live in. So it's generally, say 1 in 10,000, that's really rare. But if you're a carrier and your mate is a carrier, then the odds that your child will have it is 1 in 4. However, I had 2, so 2 out of 2. So I would say I hit the jackpot twice. So I think that it's rare, but there are families where both parents are a carrier and they'll have 2 kids that have PKU. I've heard of quite a few people talking on the internet about what it's like to live with a genetic condition who have siblings who both have PKU. So it's 1 in 4 each time you have a child.
Okay. And then for me, so there was a 25% chance that I would have PKU. And then there was a 25% chance that I would not have PKU. And there was a 50% chance that I would be a carrier.
That's right.
Just like you. Yeah.
And your dad.
Yeah. And somehow both my sister and I got that 25% chance of having PKU.
Yes, you both have PKU. But the good news is that if you have children, that your children would not have PKU if your person you have children with, so if the father, if you decide to have kids, doesn't have PKU and is not a carrier, then your children also would not have it, because then it would be carried again. So it runs silent through the generations until there's 2 defective copies of the gene.
Although I have to say, I would be fine if my kid had PKU.
Yes.
And I think part of that is because I have grown up with PKU, so I would maybe have a greater understanding of the challenges of it, and it would not be a strange diet adoption or anything like that. So
we're very lucky that PKU is one of the very few inherited genetic diseases or conditions where there is a treatment and the treatment works and your life is completely normal if you have the food adjustment in the diet. So we're lucky that way.
Yeah.
In fact, when your sister was born, people were curious, like, oh, do you hope she does have or doesn't have PKU? And like it was a big question among everybody I knew, would be talking to me about that. And I'd say, well, if she does have PKU, it'd make it a whole lot easier for the two siblings to be partners where they are both eating the same kinds of things and they're both watching their diet together. And so it would be a friend, a sibling, a partner, someone who understood what you were going through. So I was always thinking that would be just fine. So when she was born with PKU, we were like, oh, good. Someone's using her. It's like, what's wrong with you? But it's, because we knew at that point it was something we could manage and we could handle. So
yeah. And plus, you're a vegetarian, so that made it a lot easier as well.
Yeah. It was a meat-free household, so that was easier for me than for some people.
And is there anything else on genetics that you wanted to touch on that we didn't mention yet?
So your genetics means the DNA you get from your family when you're born. And it's affected by what you do the rest of your life, but basically you're born with something. That's what genetics means. So genetic disease is one that you're born with and starts when you're born.
So everybody kind of has their own genetic code.
Yes, we all have unique genetic codes, but we get half from our mom and half from our dad.
And it's very random.
Yes, you don't just get one whole half from your mom and one whole half from your dad. The half from your mom has all been rearranged during recombination. So it's unique. The half you get from your mom isn't like one half went to you and one half went to your sister. It's one half that's all been reassorted and rearranged just for you. It's unique, completely unique. So each person is unique through their DNA.
Cool.